is the Seahawkers podcast, quick reaction show for the Seahawks game against the Kansas City Chiefs on Sunday night. They get the win 38-31. I'm Brandan Schultz of the Military Seahawkers, and joining me all the way from England, Rob Staton of SeahawksDraftBlog.com. How you doing, Rob?
Really good, Brandan. You know, when you stay awake all night, as I have done, to watch the Seahawks play, and it also happens to be, it's now Christmas Eve over here in the UK, it's easier to deal with when you've watched a win.
Absolutely. And for me too. See, not only is it almost Christmas Eve here, today's my 17th wedding anniversary. So, it's when you combine all these things together, and it turns out my wife's, a lot more understanding of the necessity to record after a post-game win, knowing that our Seahawks are going to the playoffs, Rob.
Yeah, well, I've had a few Christmases that have been ruined by the Seahawks. I really shouldn't allow that to happen. I'm thinking of the 2013 loss against Arizona, which kind of put me in a bad mood throughout Christmas Day. There was the game a couple of years ago when they also lost to Arizona again right before Christmas, which meant that they missed out on the number 2 seed to the Falcons and then lost to them on the road in the playoffs, which kind of ruined Christmas for me. So it's been good the last couple of years. They've won this game. They beat Dallas on Christmas Eve last year, so it's a much better feeling.
I'm glad they did it now, because I did not want to wait until the Arizona game. There's been so many times where Arizona has given us problems in the second to last week or in the last week of the season, and I just did not want to put this off to chance that we had to absolutely beat Arizona in the final week of the season to get the win, even though they're in contention for the worst team in the league and up for the number 1 draft pick. I did not want that chance to be on the table.
Yeah, and I didn't want to limp into the playoffs either. If they'd have lost this game, then it's back-to-back defeats. You're kind of going into the Arizona game, and if they win that, people are going to say the Seahawks are only really there because it's been a funny year in the NFC. There's been a few teams that have really underwhelmed. You think of the Minnesota Vikings haven't done as well as everyone thought. The Packers have struggled. The Eagles they've bounced back a little bit towards the end of the year, but struggled for a large part of it. The Redskins fell away. The 49ers were expected to be competitive and weren't. And it's kind of the perfect storm, really, for a team who was going to be maybe a 9-win team to get in there. And if the Seahawks did it by just beating the worst team in the NFL, then that would have been fine. We would have all enjoyed it. As Seahawks fans, we would have said, "Oh, what the hell? We don't care." But we would have listened to an awful lot of negative media. I would expect going into that first playoff game. Maybe that wouldn't be such a bad thing, actually. If they ended up going to Dallas or Chicago and everybody kind of counted them out, might actually be a good thing. But I think it's better this way. They've got a quality win against the Chiefs. It draws a line under the Niners' defeat last week. It enables them to maybe even consider resting some guys who are banged up against Arizona. They will still get a very good chance to win that game, even if they pull Russell Wilson at halftime, even if they give Doug Baldwin the week off and one or two others, because the Cardinals are a team that are, they're preparing to get the number 1 overall pick. I don't think there's anything that they really want to jeopardize that right now. Josh Rosen got injured this week, so probably isn't going to play. So it'll be Glennon at quarterback. They're on the brink of firing their head coach and possibly their GM as well. I think the players, a few of them seem to already be thinking about the holidays rather than, going into Seattle next week and playing with that kind of intensity that the Bruce Arians team's always brought to Seattle. So I would imagine that next week is going to be a win, whatever the Seahawks do, and then they can look ahead to a game against Dallas.
The Cardinals are in a very different position than even the 49ers were. You look at the 49ers team, and there's a team that's not going to quit. Even against the Bears today, that was a team that was not going to quit. And then you look at Arizona, a totally different situation there. Now, you brought up the injuries, and I thought injuries was going to play a much bigger role in this game than it did, because you had Germain Ifedi out. And I even heard people saying, oh, geez, Fetty's out? Oh, no. That's not something that we would have heard in past years with the Seahawks team. People would not have been concerned, but yet, and Fluker wasn't even getting the start. So we had a really interesting situation on the right side of the line with Posick starting at right guard, and then George Fant going from his tight end spot and moving into the right tackle spot. And even during the game, then we saw Sweezy go down, And they shifted everything again. You had DJ Fluker come in off the bench, who who couldn't start the game apparently, and you had Fant out there, and then Posick moving into the left guard spot where we saw him play last year. It worked out.
It's incredible. The turnaround from a year ago and years previous has just been sensational. And, Mike Solari thoroughly deserves to be in contention for Assistant Coach of the Year. To think a year ago that George Fant's injury at left tackle completely destroyed this team pretty much before the season had even begun, that the offensive line never recovered from losing Fant, who has really just been the sixth offensive lineman this year and filled in at right tackle this game. His departure with an injury in the preseason spoiled a lot of things, and if they'd have missed a couple of other guys on top of that, then the line would have been a complete disaster year. It was a complete disaster anyway. It would have been even worse.
Yeah.
And then you look at this year, and you're right. No Jermaine Ifedi, no DJ Fluker because he didn't start the game. They don't have Jordan Simmons, who's their backup right guard, and then they lose J.R. Sweezy in the game. There's a lot of moving parts, a lot of players coming in who haven't played a lot of football, a lot of players that you're unsure how they're going to get on, and they still rush for over 200 yards. They still give, especially in that second half, Russell Wilson just enough time to be able to perform some of the magic that he produced. And they score 38 points against a decent team. They beat a team that, a few weeks ago, people were wondering whether they were the best in the NFL. It's a really quality win, and that offensive line and the way that it's turned around with Brian Schottenheimer and Mike Solari leading the way, I think it's incredible, and I don't think it's anything that anybody expected. But I think you have to give them a lot of credit there. They won the turnover battle. They dominated time of possession. They only had 3 penalties after setting a franchise record with 14 penalties for nearly 150 yards a week ago. They tidied things up there with the injuries that they had. This was a really excellent win. One of the best wins in recent memory. It's probably one of the top 5 wins since the last Super Bowl, really, because of what was at stake, the caliber of the opponent, the caliber of the opposition quarterback, that they managed to finish this one off and get the win.
Russell Wilson, 18 for 29 on the day, 271 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, quarterback rating of 127. And Chris Carson, you mentioned that day on the ground, 210 yards overall. Chris Carson had 116 of those, 27 attempts. He goes over 1,000 yards for the year, the first 1,000-yard rusher since Marshawn Lynch back in 2014. He has 2 touchdowns in the game. We knew going up against this defense, and one of the lowest ranked defense against the run, that it was going to be possible, and they were going to have to play really a perfect game to put up enough points against Patrick Mahomes, who, gosh, after that game, I don't know if I could say enough good things about that dude. What did you think of Mahomes' performance?
He's a fantastic player. For me, he's the NFL MVP. I know a lot of people want to vote for Drew Brees, and I kind of understand that. But when I would look at Drew Brees and the Saints, I would say that they have Kamara, they have Ingram, they have Thomas. They've spent a lot of picks on their offensive line. I think their defense is loaded. They have a great head coach. They kind of have everything in New Orleans, and you would expect them to succeed. And I think it'd be a major disappointment if the Saints weren't certainly in the postseason, or at least competing for a bye in the first round. And they've achieved that, and you have to give them a lot of credit. And Brees has had a fantastic season. But you look at Mahomes, and he's got some. It's not to say that he hasn't got some weapons, but he's lost the running back Kareem Hunt. He has just elevated this team to a new level from where they were with Alex Smith a year ago. He just does things that he does the unexpected. He's nearly thrown 50 touchdown passes. He doesn't turn the ball over very often. He's just a magician, and it's incredible to watch him. And I think this is the most impressive thing about this win. It's the entirety of the team, really, because you see Wilson still managing to put up enough to defeat a guy like that, to sort of go toe to toe with him and come out on top. That's great to see. It's also great to see this young defense, especially the defense that was missing players. The free safety. We're talking about the second string free safety here, because Earl Thomas has already gone out. Now Tedrick Thompson's out. So Bradley McDougall played there. He's been injured. You've got a KJ Wright just coming back into it, having lost Michael Kendricks. You've got a number of injuries on that defense, and for them to 31 points, you would say they didn't limit him too much, but to me, it felt like they limited him. They had somewhat of control on the game throughout, and the only real time if you think about it, how many game minutes were the Chiefs actually leading in this game? It was for that brief moment after the Janikowski missed kick when they immediately marched down the field and scored, but then Seattle came straight back and responded. So the Chiefs never really had a stranglehold in the game, and although in the fourth quarter Mahomes threatened to do what he did to Baltimore in Week 14, which was to come storming back and just refuse to be beaten, it was actually Russell Wilson who said today, I'm not going to be beaten today. And he produced the plays, and he made the huge downfield throws to get that final drive, to get that final touchdown from Chris Carson to make sure the Seahawks were going to win. So I think a superb performance from Patrick Mahomes. He will win Super Bowls. He will win the MVP, I believe, this season. He is destined for greatness. He's practically there already. But I think what today also showed is that Russell Wilson most definitely is there already. He's reached greatness. He has won a Super Bowl, should have won a second one, could easily win more in his career. And what a fantastic quarterback the Seahawks have.
If you would have told me that the Chiefs would have only led in this game for 1 minute and 4 seconds, that I wouldn't have believed you. and yet that's what they did. And let's go back to the beginning of the game, because really it couldn't have started much better for the Seahawks. They win the coin toss, they kick the ball to the Chiefs, and the defense is able to get 3 and out. And I don't know if the Seahawks don't have Bradley McDougald and KJ Wright on the field for this game. I don't know if they're able to do what they did against the Chiefs. There were some really interesting wrinkles that we got to see. We saw Akeem King on the field a lot, lined up with tight end Travis Kelce. I thought that made a difference in the game, but able to get the 3 and out, get the ball back, and go on for a 5-minute drive where Chris Carson gets in for a 4-yard touchdown, up 7-0. They're able to hold the Chiefs to a field goal. Then it goes a little bit sideways for them, and Janikowski misses a 30-yard field goal. The Chiefs come back and able to get a touchdown, take the lead. And it really wasn't until they got that turnover from the Chiefs, the fumble from the running back, where they, within 20 yards, able to punch it in, another touchdown to Nick Vannett. And really from there, they had the game under control.
Yeah, I think this is what I love about the NFL. It's kind of week to week, it completely keeps you guessing. It changes every week. So a week ago, the Seahawks couldn't defend a tight end. The 2 tight ends in San Francisco had huge days. They could have had even more yardage and touchdowns because there was a few blown coverages that the 49ers didn't capitalize on. And going into this game, you really fear for the Seahawks because Travis Kelce was for the Chiefs. Obviously, he's had a fantastic year, and you just sort of fear the worst, that he's going to have a day similar to Kittle a week ago. Yet maybe it's funny because the Seahawks may well have spent all week sort of looking and studying what they got wrong in terms of defending the tight ends and come up with a plan which involved Akeem King, who had a fantastic game defending Kelce. And the Chiefs may well have seen what the 49ers did and sort of felt pretty safe and assured that they were going to be able to make plays at the tight end and didn't prepare as much for that. And it works in the Seahawks' favor. And sometimes these things do work that way in the NFL. So Kelce had a very quiet game, was barely noticeable throughout. King played superbly, and that wasn't a factor at all. And I think going into the week, you spoke to most people and said, what is going to be the difference maker? Who's going to be the playmaker for Mahomes? Who's going to be the difference maker in this game? You'd have said without a shadow of a doubt, Kelce. Didn't happen.
Yeah, if not Kelce, Tyreek Hill. And you look at Kelce's stats, 5 of 9, 54 yards, and Hill just 4 catches on 9 targets, 74 yards.
Yeah, you would think that Hill would have some good times against Flowers and against Shaquille Griffin, and that wasn't the case at all. And Mahomes had to look to other people. The running back got his yards, but I think the Seahawks were pretty comfortable with that because they thought they could handle him and bottle him up when they needed to. It's a bit harder to do that with Tyreek Hill because he's downfield, big plays. Kelce's the same. So all in all, I think just a really solid game plan. And I think the Seahawks addressed some of the issues from last week, which is encouraging. And luckily, it doesn't seem as if the J.R. Sweezy injury is too serious. He seems to think it's not that bad. That aside, they seem to have not picked up any further serious injuries in this game.
the one to watch, I think, is going to be Sebastian Janikowski. And it was that 47-yard field goal where it's no good. They get the roughing the kicker call on Kansas City. You see Janikowski kind of clutching his back after going to the ground, and he had to come out for the kickoffs. And it resulted in Michael Dixon, kicking one out of bounds and giving the Chiefs some pretty good field position at one point. But there he was able to come on, kick some extra points. He was able to, at the end of the game, came on and able to boot it down the field. Unfortunately, they give up a pretty decent return when Kansas City looked like they were going to be out of it, and it still ended up making it interesting at the end. So really, when I think about Janikowski, that's the one I'm worried about with the missed field goals now, and we have some missed extra points from weeks before. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with him going into the postseason.
Yeah, it will, and it's a bit of a concern. The extra point last week, whether or not it was the defining factor, I mean, they went into overtime. That extra point would have won them the game. There's so much happened between that missed extra point and if he kicks the extra point, do they even kick it the same way? Anything could have. Maybe don't have the return touchdown. The game could have been completely different, but still, he missed the extra point. He's missed a few of them. He's missed a few field goals. I wrote about this in the blog actually. I've sort of said at the very least they need to open the competition again in the off season. And sort of at least see what's out there and bring somebody else in to compete with him in the way that they did with Myers and Janikowski. They need to have two guys there. And I suspect that's a formality that they will do that. People will then say, no, he needs to go in the offseason. That's it. He's had his opportunity. But, if he kicks every field goal between now and the end of the season and the Seahawks have a deep playoff run, then it would be surprising if he didn't come back and was at least assumed as the starter. And he has won games for them. He won the game with a field goal against Arizona. He did the same against Carolina, so it's not been all bad, but there have been sufficiently enough of an issue there that it kind of makes you wonder, is there an opportunity for them to go out and sign someone like Robbie Gould, for example, who is unspectacular and just goes out and kicks everything and you don't worry about him? Everybody seems to be having something of an issue with kicking at the moment in the NFL, apart from Justin Tucker, but even he missed an important extra point this season to lose a game for the Ravens. So I think that you kind of balance it out. Janikowski hasn't been a disaster. Can he be better? Yes. There is going to be a question mark there in the offseason, and fingers crossed that he's healthy, because the last thing you want to be doing right now is looking at who are the kickers available, because there really isn't anybody out there.
No, going into the postseason, I think as long as he's healthy, you're going to want to stick with Janikowski. Now, he was ultimately able to make that 28-yarder on that same drive. The Chiefs come back, they score a touchdown, and then Seattle on the following drive tied 17-17. I think this is one place where the game could have turned for the worse, because you had Nick Vannett, false start. Then it's 1st and 15. And it seems like every time that the Seahawks back up a little bit, the play calling gets, a little bit restrictive, and they lose another yard on first down. So they're going 2nd and 16. And only gain one more yard. So it's 3rd and 15. And you're going, oh, here we go. Are they just going to check it down to somebody? Are they going to, run a draw play on 3rd and 15? But Russell Wilson able to scramble out to the left side, finds Ed Dixon on the sideline. And Dixon was not going to be denied that first down, gets 18 yards. And, 2 plays later, Russell's throwing to Doug Baldwin, and that's the play where, Baldwin just gets over the goal line, has 1 foot in bounds, gets his elbow in bounds, and gets the go-ahead touchdown to put it up 24-17.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great example of the way that the game swayed between the two teams, and it ebbed and flowed. So you had the Chiefs touchdown there, as you mentioned, to make it's 17-all, and at the time you're thinking, we've seen Mahomes do this so often, take over a game. It felt that the Seahawks had maybe just stalled a little bit. They weren't putting the points up. They'd had the missed field goal. They'd had some missed opportunities to score touchdowns. And you fear for their ability to keep scoring, to keep throwing counter punches, to keep responding to the Chiefs, and they get behind the 8 ball with the false start. They have a couple of plays where you think, are they going to be able to get out of this? And then they execute a 3rd and 15 because of a great play by Ed Dixon. And just from there, the game completely swings. Instead of punting the ball back to the Chiefs and running the risk of them coming down and scoring another touchdown themselves, you've regained the initiative, you go on and score the great touchdown to Doug Baldwin, great throw, great catch, and all of a sudden you put the pressure back on them. And it was that type of game. I mean, all the way through, right up until the final touchdown from Chris Carson, it was that. It was just that kind of game. There was plays where it could have gone either way, tight throws that were completed or not completed, decisions that were made correctly or just slightly incorrectly that completely shifted games in huge swings. And it's just good that on the night the Seahawks had enough of those kind of moments go in their favor.
The Seahawks defense able to hold the Chiefs to a field goal. Russell Wilson coming back on the following drive. How would they respond with the Chiefs just going to the field goal? The defense able to make a relatively big stop, because I think if you tie it up there, it's still you're trading. And there were a couple moments where the Seahawks able to hold the Chiefs to just a field goal. You had a deep left pass to Tyler Lockett for 25 yards. You had that play where Russell Wilson scrambles up the middle, almost sacked and able to get 26 yards on the play, slides down right in front of Eric Berry. Next play, Chris Carson's running up the middle for 11 yards, doing a little fancy spin move and finding Ed Dixon in the back of the end zone. Russell Wilson, another game, 3 touchdown passes.
Yeah, fantastic from Wilson today. Just his it was typical of Wilson, really, his ability to improvise, his ability to make plays that, away from the structure of what was the call because the defense has done something or something hasn't particularly worked, but he finds a way to make a play. Very similar to Mahomes, whether it's a scramble, whether it's throwing from a difficult angle, as much as Mahomes got the attention and, I wouldn't say it was unfairly. There was a lot of focus on the TV broadcast on NBC about how incredible Mahomes is and he does this, that, and the other. And really, Wilson did just as much on the night. There was just as much magic from Wilson as there was Mahomes, probably a little bit more from Wilson because of those deep throws into tight windows that made for some huge explosive plays downfield. And look, Wilson was incredible prior to those plays. You look at some of the defenders today. I think that Frank Clark had another great game. Jaron Reed had another great game. And then Justin Coleman has just played such a consistent level all season. Yeah. I think that people like Coleman, for example, because he hasn't got 6 picks, for example, you kind of you wonder whether or not he's played that well, or people don't really talk about him that much. But the way that he's covered in the slot and been able to make just enough plays this year and has not really been exposed at any point, I think there's just sort of a period of 2 or 3 games earlier in the year when he missed a few tackles. Apart from that, he's been incredibly consistent. I think going into this offseason, they've got big decisions to make because they have got to find a way to, they're going to find a way to keep Frank Clark, whether that's the franchise tag or a big new contract. Mm-hmm. They're probably going to extend Jaron Reed. That won't affect his 2019 cap too much. He's got 1 year left, but they can extend him for the next 3 or 4 years after that and reward him as he deserves to be rewarded. But they've got to find a way to keep Justin Coleman as well. It's a very difficult position to fill nickel corner. When you've got a good one at a good age, Coleman's 25, it's going to be 26, I think, in March. You've got to find a way to keep those players. They're 3 key keeps for the offseason. They played very well as well today, as Russell Wilson did too.
Well, and how about some love for Doug Baldwin in this game? Because 7 catches, 126 yards, a touchdown. I mentioned him on the 1 touchdown catch, but late in the game on their last touchdown drive, Russell has him wide open. The defender makes a great play to knock the ball down. Baldwin's ankles turn a little bit, and he's hobbled coming up. But then just a few plays later, after the big connection down the sideline to Tyler Lockett for 45 yards, holy smokes, what a deep ball that was. And then 2 plays later, he's hitting Baldwin down to the 1 yard line with a 20-yard catch. And that catch by Baldwin, the concentration to just kind of tip it to himself as he's going down to the ground. And they're able to get it down at the 1 yard line. A incredible catch by Baldwin, a huge game by him. And he makes such a big difference being back in the lineup.
He's a spectacular player, and I made a point in the blog that a combo, a duo like Russell Wilson and Doug Baldwin is a duo that you dream about if you don't have them. If you're a team that is rebuilding, you would love to have a receiver and a quarterback that've got that kind of chemistry and that connection, and they've got it. Baldwin's a fantastic player. The idea of not having him is pretty scary. And he might not have the size of a number one like a Julio Jones or somebody like that, and he may not have the massive production of someone like Antonio Brown. But to the Seahawks, he is their number one. He's a very vital piece of what this offense is, and they want to run the ball and they want to be physical and they want to hit you in the mouth. But there are certain third down plays, for example, where you just need to throw the ball to Doug Baldwin and you can rely on him to get open. When he was lining up against the rookie corner that they were playing today, Kansas City, it was a mismatch completely. And you just see the savvy, the understanding, the ability, that nous, that knowledge to get open from Baldwin was there time and time again. He had a huge game. He's a player that if he was in a different offense, in an offense that maybe spread things out a little bit more, through or went into games to throw 40 times and not run as much, you think in systems like New England, you just imagine what kind of numbers he would have put up. I mean, he would be
Steve Smith.
I think if probably even better than that. If you put him in the Patriots with Brady and have him replacing Wes Welker back in the day when they moved on instead of Julian Edelman, with the durability that he's had and the way that he's been able to produce and consistently get open, I could imagine that he would be one of the leaders in terms of stats, could potentially be on his way to a Hall of Fame career because he's got the talent. He just hasn't had the numbers because of Seattle's system and the way that they play. And the fact that he's just kind of got on with the job and delivered season after season after season is credit to him as a character, credit to him as a man. It shows that he hasn't got the same kind of ego as maybe some of his former college teammates have, who have since departed the team. And I just think that, you've just got to give the guy tremendous credit. And, there's been little bits of talk on Twitter and various other places about moving on from Russell Wilson soon or moving on from Doug Baldwin and saving money there. I can't imagine the Seahawks are going to do either of those things. They've got to keep those two players. They're so important.
Well, speaking of his former Stanford teammate, it's kind of fun. And somebody pointed this out on Twitter that the Seahawks get to go to the playoffs in the same day that Sherman gets ejected from a game for throwing a punch on the sideline. So it's kind of fun.
Yeah, it is. It's just frustrating that they lost last week. I kind of get the impression that maybe that's going to see Richard Sherman through an off season. The fact that they won that one game, but the 49ers are going to pick in the top three. I think Kyle Shanahan, again, has done a very good job towards the end, just as he did last season, in getting them to play tough and compete. And I think if he can get a settled team with a settled quarterback and add a bit more talent on both sides of the ball, then they are going to be a very difficult opponent for the Seahawks and for the Rams moving forward. But, I kind of feel that that's actually a good thing rather than a bad thing. And I think one of the issues that the Seahawks have got is that the Rams are very good at beating bad teams, as we saw against Arizona here. The Seahawks generally tend to play every game tight, as we've also seen there. The Rams, what they will do is they'll play a good team and they'll play them tight. But when they play the bad teams, they kind of just blow them out the water because they're just better and their system is very difficult to manage unless you're on it and you're in terms of your own identity. And I think if you have other teams in the division who are nicking games off the Rams and you can bring them back down to the pack, and if the Seahawks can find a way to either split the series with the Rams or maybe even win both games as they nearly did this year, then it kind of brings everybody together. So I don't think it would be the worst thing in the world if the Niners are more competitive next year. It kind of means that the Rams will look at the Cardinals and the Niners this year and think that's 4 easy wins. They're going to win every game in the NFC West this year. I think if the division gets harder and it becomes more competitive, it actually plays into the favor of everybody and brings the Rams back to your level, which I think would be a good thing.
Rob, I was frustrated about that 49ers game, but now I have another NFC West team in my sights. I want to see the Rams in the playoffs, and it's looking like it could happen.
Yeah, bring it on. I'd love to play the Rams again. Those were 2 really close games that the Seahawks could have easily won and maybe should have won them. They had the ball in the fourth quarter with an opportunity to go and win those games.
Each game.
And didn't take it. And, at the time we were kind of just grateful. I mean, I certainly was. The first game, I think everybody was kind of scared a little bit, fearing the worst, that it was going to be another blowout, and it wasn't, and they were competitive and nearly won. So you kind of felt the positive of that. And then when they played them again, it was a very injured Seahawks team, again, fearing the worst somewhat, and they competed again. So we felt good, even though losing both games, you kind of felt good afterwards that the Seahawks had even been competitive. And now looking back on it, you're kind of disappointed they didn't win one of those, just to say that they had managed to win one. So to get a third opportunity to go and play them, the Rams have got no home field advantage. If the Seahawks play there in the playoffs, there's every chance there'll be more Seahawks fans there than Rams fans. It's a winnable game. Who knows what's happening with Todd Gurley? He's hurt all of a sudden. Jared Goff has not played particularly well in recent weeks.
Been a different guy without Cooper Kupp on the field.
the defense, I think, has given up more. I was sort of watching Red Zone a little bit earlier. They said that the defense has given up either more points or more yards than any other defense in the NFL in the last few weeks.
Yeah.
So the defense isn't playing very well despite having Aaron Donald. It is a game. And look, it's very difficult to beat a team 3 times in a single season. So, you give them another opportunity to go and win there, then it would be a great opportunity. But, they're probably going to play Dallas. Dallas are a funny team because they're tough. They run the ball. They've got a good defense. They're going to be at home. But then you watch them play and they nearly blow every single game that they play. They've got a good home record, but every game seems to have been tight. A lot of things have gone Dallas's way. Not a particularly strong playoff record. Not a great quarterback, a decent one. So you think that's possibly a winnable game. And if they win it, well, then it's between... whoever wins between the Bears and finishes in the 6th seed at the moment is Minnesota,
right?
To determine whether or not you're going to LA or going to the Saints. And if it was Minnesota, who a lot of people thought maybe would win the number 1 overall seed or the number 1 seed this year, if they were to beat the Bears, then you would be going to LA in the second round. So it's possible. It's probably more likely to be if you beat Dallas, New Orleans, but it'd be great. It'd be a great opportunity to go there and take them on again. And I sincerely hope it happens because I think they may well win.
New Orleans locking up the number 1 seed today with their win, so that's going to factor in how these playoffs roll out. And Rob, I really want to thank you for coming on and breaking down the game. I know it's early in the morning there. It is Christmas Eve, and I want to wish you and your family a Merry Christmas. Thanks again for coming on.
Oh, thank you, Brandan. Look, Merry Christmas to all the Seahawks fans. Merry Christmas to everybody. I hope you enjoyed that Kansas City game as much as we both did. Thanks for listening to this podcast. And here's to a successful postseason for the Seahawks. Let's hope they can go on a bit of a run here and make some noise in the postseason and in the playoffs. And be sure to follow all of Rob's comments on SeahawksDraftBlog.com. And Rob, I think with that, there's only one thing left to say. Go Hawks! Go Hawks!